Hi, welcome. All right. So yesterday we looked at how we could be able to quickly access the keyboard. We looked at some shortcuts, but today we move on. We now look at how to deal with date and number format formulas. Okay. So you just go to the next sheet. So we're going to look at the topics that we're going to cover for today. We're going to look at data calculation templates, data number formatting. You see them there. Okay. So now, when you are dealing with Excel and you want to do some financial calculations, and that involves dates, you have to be able to understand how Excel treats dates for you to be able to be more efficient on how you use dates. Okay. So I showed you earlier on that if you want to be able to put up a date, actually before I even mention that, you know that the date in Excel follows the format of your date. So if your format of your date is this type, which means even what you do in Excel will follow that format of the date of your computer. Okay. So right now I want to be able to enter dates, but when I enter a date, what does a date mean? So for instance, I want to enter the current date for today. So if I want to enter the current date, I can go and say control tilde. So when not actually control full colony. So if I say control full colony, it will enter my current date right now. Okay, that's a shortcut of entering your current date. Control full colony. Now I want to understand what lies beneath this date, because if I click on it, you are seeing that there is a date there, but what lies beneath the date? So if I come here under number, or when I go to the home, then I come to under number here. If I click on the drop down, then I say make it a general format, you see that beneath it, what was there was actually a number, which is 43,865. Now what does this number mean? Okay, so this same number which is there, let me just zoom in. So this same number which is there, if I change this back to date, it will give me the actual date for today, which I had entered previously. So how does this work? All right, so if I click on this date, I turn it to general, it gives me this number. What if I put 1 here? What date will it give me? So if I come here and I turn this 1 to date, what it now shows me that it shows me 1st January 1900. So now this is your first date in Excel. So right now what it's counting, these are the number of days from 1900, 1st January 1900 to date. These are the number of days which have passed. Okay, so this is how the dates are. What you see here is just some formatting, but what it keeps inside is what we call what is actually the numbers. Okay, it keeps the numbers. All right, so if I come and put 2 there, I press enter and I change the formatting to date format, you see that this changes to second. Okay, it's January 2nd 1900. All right, so now you've understood how date works. Now let us deal a bit with time. If you want to enter time, you just press Ctrl Shift full colony and it will enter the time, the current time of the current time of your computer at that time. All right, so this is how you enter time. Control Shift then full colony. All right, that's how you enter time. Okay, so in a case that I want to enter the date, in a case I want to enter date and time in the same cell, what I have to do is control full colony, then space, then control shift semicolon. Okay, then you'll be able to enter your time. All right, if I press enter here, you'll see this is our time, and this is our date and time. All right, so if I change this to date, if I come here and I change this to general rather, you see that it's giving you the number of days, and actually the number of days in decimals. All right, okay, we'll look at this more when we're dealing with time, on how the time operates. So for now, let's get down to some examples here. So what we have here is that we've got a supplier, and we have an invoice which has been issued out, and you have the date. So what we want to find out is how many days is it from the due date of the invoice. So the due date of the invoice is on this date, but we want to find out as of today how many days have passed since the due date. Okay, so now to do that, we have to be able to put in a formula in such that if tomorrow I open this sheet, it should automatically update and give me the actual date of today. In order to do that, if I'm to type in the current date, for instance, today it's February 4th of 2020. Okay, so if I press if I enter the date like this, it will be correct, but only for today, because if we move to tomorrow, this date will remain stagnant to on 4th, it won't be 5th. So to overcome this, we use a formula, then we say today. Okay, sorry, equals today. Then you press enter, then it will give you the current date. So this date will always be updating itself. So if we go to tomorrow, it will be 5th January 2020. In order to automatically populate the cells going down, you just come here where there is a solid square, then double click on it, then it will auto populate the entire sheet. Okay, now when it comes to when you're dealing with the other cells, in this case, let's say you want to hard code the data, but now you want to put it in a shortcut way. You can be able to say control tilde, control rather full colony, and it will give you the date. Now here what you have a challenge, because if you auto populate this, what you have happening is that the data will be increasing as it goes down. Okay, now this is good when you are probably doing a calendar, but in this case you want the same date to populate the cells as it goes down. So in order to overcome that, you have this square here. If you click on it, instead of fill series, you come and select copy cells. So if you copy cells, it will auto populate with the same date which was in the cell. All right, hope that is clear. Now let's perform a calculation to find out how many days have passed since the due date. All right, by how many days is the invoice late? Now what we're going to do is to say equals, then the current date that we're dealing with, which is that, minus the due date. If you press enter, it will give you by how many days the invoice is late. And what you just do is auto populate it by clicking on that solid corner, and it will run down. Okay, so now you will see that this one was late by this number of days, that one was late by number of days. Okay, this is the formula, equals the today's date minus the due date. All right, check this out, try it. If you have got any challenge, please get in touch. Let's look at another example here. What we want to find out is to know the maturity date of a loan. We've got a borrower here, and we've got a loan here, and we've got the issue date, and we've got the terms, the term of days. So how many days to maturity? Okay, so the loan amount was this amount here, the issue date is here. So for us to calculate the maturity date, which means we're going to add up the number of days to the issue date, then we'll be able to have the maturity date. So to do that, we'll say equals, then you click on the issue date plus the number of days to maturity. Okay, so the term of days is 300. So if I press enter, it gives me the date on which the loan will be mature. So if I run this down, it will auto populate, because if I come and click on this, it automatically knows that if I run down a formula, the cells this side should also run down. Okay, now to explain this how it works, let me come here. So right now when I write a formula, it knows if I say J20, it means that I have to move 2 spaces going to my left. Okay, or rather move negative, I'll move -2 spaces. Okay, -2 spaces to which means horizontally. All right, then if I like here I've placed K20, it knows I'm going to move only 1 space horizontally, okay, to my left. So if I'm running down, this formula will continue running down, saying move 2 spaces this side, 1 space that side, 2 spaces, just like that. That's how it auto populates the data. All right, let's go on and look at another example. Scroll to the left. All right, so now what we have here is the pension vest date. Okay, so what we want to find out, this employee is hired on this date. When is his pension vest? Okay, so we want to find out the date on which the pension is going to be vest. All right, so what do you do here? You say equals. Now the hiring date is this. Now we know that this will the pension will mature on this date. Okay, in order to do this, you have to use the e-date formula. The e-date formula allows you to be able to calculate, to find out the date in the future by which a particular event will happen based on the number of days or months or years given. So in this case, we'll use the e-date. So what is our starting date? This is what the formula is asking us. So our starting date is this date here, comma. Then we are asking ourselves how many months. Now the e-date deals with months, but in this case we are dealing with 5 years. Okay, so in order to deal with this one, what we'll do is that we'll just say we'll say 5 times 12, because each month each year has got 12 months. So since we have got 5 years, which means it will be 5 times 12. So we'll say the number of years times 12. Okay, then we cross bracket. But here we have got a problem because P17, this is a relative reference, which means if we run it down, it will give us an error because it will P17. If we move to the next cell, it will no longer be P17 to become P18 because it will be running down the cells. So if I press enter here, it's giving me the date, but this date which it's giving me, it is in general format. So we can come quickly here, change it to the date format, and it gives me the date on which the pension will be vested, the date of the pension vest. All right. So if I want to run it down, if I come and run it down here, it gives me an error. Okay, you see here, this one is due on the hiring date is this date, but the date on which the pension will pension vest will be, it is 2014, same year, but yet it's supposed to be 5 years ahead. So the reason why it's doing that, if I double click in the formula, is that it is referring to the right cell here, but when it comes to the years until the vest, it is referring to a wrong cell. So to do this, you have to make an absolute reference. Now, how do you do this absolute reference? You lock the cell by putting a $sign in front of the P and in front of the number. If you put a $sign in front of the P and the number, then that cell, you have made an absolute reference to the cell that you have locked up. So if I press enter right now, then run this down, you'll see now that it has got the right figures. Okay, now when you're dealing with Excel, these are some of the things that you need to be aware of. If, for instance, this 5 here can never change, if it can never change, you can hardcore or hard type it in here. All right, but if it is likely to change, you always have to make a cell reference to it. Okay, but if you look at 12, the number of months, this is stagnant. So if I hardcore 12 here, there is no problem because it will always be 12 months in a year. But for this one, for instance, if the person probably didn't read the contract very well, said 5, Wallace, when actually it's supposed to be 7 years. So if I enter 7 in that cell, if I press enter, the formula will always auto update itself. So the danger is, don't make reference, don't hardcore figures that are likely to change in your formula, because if that happens, in this case, if we're to say we put our 7 in here and press enter, then run down the formula. If I come here and change and say probably it's actually 5 years as earlier stated, if I press enter, the formula won't auto update. Okay, so be careful of that. Backspace, make reference to the cell, and now I'm going to show you how to quickly lock your cell by pressing F4. If you press F4, it absolutely locks your cell. Then if you press again on the F4, it changes, it toggles around on what column or row to lock. Okay, so we want the entire cell to be locked down. Press enter, then run down the formula, and always auto update when you change the figure in there. All right, if you have any question, please get in touch. So if you run down the formula, you can quickly come and inspect and see if your formula is doing what you're asking it to do. All right, Control Home takes us back to the top of the cell. Now let us look at Let us look at payroll and a quick round off. All right. Now, there are cases in which, let me first give you an example. Quickly give you an example here. When you're dealing with accounts, you would want a number of decimal places. Okay, so most of the times when we're dealing with accounts, look at, this is our gross, our gross earning. So if this is our gross earning, I want to be able to create only one decimal place for our gross earning. So mostly you would be able to go and probably reduce the number of decimal places. If you reduce the number of decimal places like this, it doesn't necessarily reduce the number itself or round the number as you'd think, because if you check here, this is the number which is still there, 32. So it's 0.32. But if you reduce it like this, it will not actually reduce in the actual sense. So let me take back to our 2 decimal place. So this is where it becomes important to know how many decimal places it should be rounded. Okay, so let's deal with this here. We have got our tax rate here, which is 15.75, and this is our gross pay. So we want to find out how much should be the deduction. So to know the deduction, I'll say equals, then I'll make reference to the cell, our gross income, multiply it to our tax rate. So now our tax rate is this one. So this one, our tax rate must be an absolute reference, because as we run down, we want to always refer to this tax rate. Now, as I said before, when you're dealing with a figure that is likely to change, you make it a cell reference. We would have had typed this one in our formula if this 15 does not likely there's no likelihood of it to change anytime soon or later on. So if I press enter, it will give us it's going to give us the deduction which is supposed to take place. So if I run it down, I'll have a problem because I have not locked my tax rate. If I come here, it's making reference to an empty sheet. So I come back here and lock it by pressing F4, then pressing enter, then running the formula down. Okay, so now we know the deduction which is supposed to be on every gross income for our employees. But now the thing that you might have a problem with, let's come down here, let's delete this. Let's have our total deduction here. Our total deduction leads us to, we can say sum, or the quickest way is alt equals then it quickly suggests for you the data that you want to add up. Press enter, then it will give you the sum total. Okay, it will give you the sum total. Now the thing that we want to do here is this: when you're dealing with a multiplication of decimals, it's not that you actually get the 2 decimal places, but it has got a bigger number. So if I come here and increase the number of decimals, you see that there are more numbers in this cell. Okay, but yet the facade of this makes you think this is the actual number which is there, but there are actually more numbers. So if these numbers are not well treated, you might actually have some accounting errors. Okay, now let me show you how to properly do this, because most accountants, they don't actually get to do round. They don't usually use the rounding formula. Now how does the rounding formula work? We'll say equals, I'll run down my formula, which is this the gross pay multiplied by our tax, and to lock it F4. If I press enter, I get my what's this? My deduction. Okay, so if I run this deduction down by coming and dragging this down, okay, it gives me my deduction, and you'll see all these decimals which are there, and in this case they are actually hidden. Okay, so in order to avoid, if I come here and I say equals, then I say literally, let me say out equals, press enter. This is the same number which it's giving me here. Okay, but the actual thing which we have a problem with here is this data, it's adding up like this without actually rounding the data. That's why we are seeing that there's a same answer which we're receiving here and there, but if you check your data, there is some difference between the figures in this. So if you use the round, which is round then what it's asking us is which number, which is this number. Then we come here and say comma, the number of digits by which we want to round this number is 2 digits, cross, press enter. Then you see that this number has been rounded to 2 digits. If we run it down, you see that all these digits have been rounded off to 2 digits. If you look at your totals, you will see that there is a difference. Here the total is 0.14, and here the total is 0.13. Now, if you're dealing with ZRA, for this kind of a difference, they might not actually come for you because it's just a little penny. But now, if probably this data that you are collecting, you are supposed to use it in another calculation as input, this data will give you wrong results. And probably if another person, you tell another person that you were rounding off this data to 2 decimal places, and they use this formula, they get a different answer. This might cause a lot of mistrust of your the software that you are using to calculate your data. So this doesn't bring much confidence when you are dealing with other accountants. All right, so this really matters, and this can cause serious problems as you are populating it with another data. All right, so you have to take mind of this. All right, okay, so today we'll end our video on the rounding. Join us tomorrow for another epic and more interesting Excel for accounting. See you then.